Welcome to The Well, where we get together and talk about life and death and everything in between. My name is Pastor Carrie, and my favorite short story is Raise High the Roof Beam Carpenters by J.D. Salinger.
My name is Jay, and my favorite coffee drink is the Red Eye.
My name is Tim, and my favorite paint color is eggshell with a little bit of pink in it.
You got a joke for us this week?
Yeah, I do have a joke. It's kind of an observation. You know what you call a chicken looking at a salad?
I know this one.
Chicken sees a salad.
I want to dislike it. I want to, but
I kinda like
I
that
really
one.
do. I kind of like that one.
I do kind of like that one
big
too.
fan of
That's
Yeah.
funny because I don't really
Yeah.
like that one. It almost didn't make the cut.
Oh, no, it's good. It's good. All right. Let's say hi to our other member of the team. Here's Mel. Oops. Hey,
Hey,
Mel.
Mel.
How's it going today? Good. Mel lives at the bottom of the well, and he, for many, many years, has been collecting topics of conversation that he overhears people who gather at the well to talk together, and then writes them down in case anybody ever wants to come by and have a nice discussion. He's agreed to let us take a look at some of his topics today. So, Mel, you want to get us started? All right, go for it. Okay, and here he comes. Oh, right there. And perfect. Thank you, Mel.
Thanks, Mel. All right.
A long one.
Martin Luther said.
Ooh, uh-oh.
Oh, Luther. Martin Luther said, "Every man must do two things alone. He must do his own believing and his own dying." Discuss the loneliness he implies here. Is there another option, or are there other options? So the quote is, "Every man must do two things alone. He must do his own believing and his own dying. Discuss the loneliness he implies here."
And that one's me first. We'll start off by saying certainly Luther meant person. Every person must do two things alone. They must do their own believing and their own dying. This seems like a really personal thing for Luther to say to me, knowing just a little bit about his life and who he was and his hopes and dreams and fears and weaknesses, that a lot of times Martin Luther did feel very much alone, especially when it came to believing for him. He was ill a lot. It's like seriously ill and like in pain a lot. And I think he thought, especially in the last half of his life, thought about dying a lot. And of course, back in the 1500s, there weren't treatments for things. And I think it's pretty widely known that I think he had a pretty decent kidney stone problem, which is a really bad problem now. Back in the 1500s, it was certainly something that could kill you, but certainly caused you lots of pain. So I think what's interesting here is he's sort of putting believing and dying together. Like, what do these two things, have in common? And I think in some ways, the way I think about that is when all else comes to an end, right? Like we talk about all things will end, but the word of God will continue. When you get to that place where, we're all sometimes in a place where we don't have human things around us or worldly things around us. And it can feel like it's just us and that void of questioning what's real. And I think that probably happens in believing and it happens in dying. And I hope that I can constantly remind myself that even in those moments, I'm not alone. I do very much believe that. I don't know what Martin Luther thought about that, but that's the most important time, both believing and dying, for me to, even if I can't feel it emotionally in the moment, to trust that the Holy Spirit is with me closer than I could ever imagine, holding me as I experience those emotions.
I know Luther struggled a lot with this, with faith and with health issues. But it was actually Luther that helped me to see beyond this when I was returning to an understanding of faith, that it wasn't me alone leading me to belief, but it was the Spirit encountering me with different people, like Pastor Lee at our church in Albuquerque, Faith Lutheran, and the other people there, and then other people from my congregation in Des Moines that led me to seminary. They all helped me in my faith walk along with the Spirit. So I think the belief part also has to do with community. It reminds me of a story about a pastor who went to visit a member who didn't feel like they wanted to go to church anymore because they weren't getting anything out of it. And they were sitting around a fire, and the pastor stood up, took a log off the fire, and the fire kept going, but that log went out. Then he put the log back on. There's something about the community that helps us. And I think not only in belief, but also in dying. When I, again, was a chaplain, there was a man who had no family available. They were on their way, but he was dying. And so they asked me to come in and sit with him just so that he had someone. So I, not knowing him, I just did the only thing I could think of doing. I had a book I was reading, and I read the book to him so that he would know there was a voice there speaking to him. Just because I think that being alone at that time, it's always been my feeling that if you want to know what's important in your life, look at those people who'll be standing over you when you're dying. It's not going to be your boss, probably. But, I don't know if I really agree with this. I think dying is an intimate family communal event. And so I kind of disagree some with Luther. I think it's community involved in both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I would have to look it up to make sure, but I'm knowing a little bit about Luther. I'm assuming that this was probably either early or late.
Yes,
in his life,
I think
one
so.
of the two, and because early for Luther, when he was starting to question things, and the beginning of the Reformation such, he really leaned on what he was learning and doing as a monk, and a lot of that was with the fasting, and so much of that was alone, and it's in a lot of that process alone that he got to where he did for the Reformation to start. So I although I'm going to show my cards and say I disagree with this for the reasons that y'all are talking about, I'm wondering if, like we do in our context, we lean on things we know and live, and our experiences is kind of where we speak from. That I'm assuming, Luther, even to the extent of, heavy male language, is a
Right.
process of the culture that he's in, but for better or for worse. And so I think for me, I lean back on an experience that I had shortly, like hours before a mentor of mine, a close friend of mine, died. He had cancer, and he held our Steph and I's hands and said that he would always be looking out for us. All we have to do is hold on to each other and remember that God is with us, and He's going to make sure that we do both. And then we met our daughter and named her Raylan. His name was Ray. And so I think for me, that situation, I've had other situations, but that situation alone pretty much makes me disagree with this, just because that was such a powerful moment. And his wife said later, like, there was just peace in his eyes because he was able to have those moments with the people that he, felt the call to have those moments with, not just us, others too. And so I think for me, like, that's just too powerful to think that we'd have to do it alone.
Agreed.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and truth be told, well, Mel is going to go grab us another topic, right, Mel? When Martin Luther was dying, he was surrounded by people. When he was actually dying, he certainly was by no means alone. So, yeah. All right. Looks like Mel's got another one for us. Perfect. Oh, thank you, Mel. All right. Let's see here. To what degree are we responsible for anyone other than ourselves? Does an action ever involve only the person deciding to act? A philosophical question here. To what degree are we responsible for anyone other than ourselves? Does an action ever involve only the person deciding to act?
Do we want a short one? No. 9.
9.
Depending on what you're talking as far as the act, my mind went negative to, like some people. We just had another one where a man went into a grocery store and kids started shooting up. He was too impatient. It was in Washington, I think. He was too impatient to wait till school starts, thank God, so he went to a grocery store instead.
Right.
So sad. But, yes, I'm not saying people aren't responsible for their actions, but I am saying there are things in that young man's life that led to that behavior. I think maybe what we've lost in our nation, because we are a bunch of frontier type people, is we've lost the idea of community. I think about how other nations have it set up where they care for those who might have needs, and I don't know why things happen, but maybe if we showed a little bit more understanding that we're responsible for each other, our world might go a little better. If in our world it's more important for you to fly into space than to make sure people are fed, maybe you are responsible for those people who are hungry. That's about where I am.
Yes, I agree with you. I think I might have even said this on a previous podcast, but I think there's some communities in various countries in Africa that there's been studies on, and I'm sure it's other places too. But the idea of Ubuntu. That y'all, I encourage you to look it up. I'm just going to do a really quick paraphrase, but basically the idea is that if somebody in my village is hurting, my village is hurting. Right. There's more to it, but that idea, and I think we live in a relatively individualized society, right? We have, I think about this a lot. I'm a huge football fan, but one of the things I've noticed, and it seems to just get worse each year, or I notice it more, I don't know, is that it's a team sport, yet we're so highly focused on the individual. Or if a cornerback makes a great play, the cameras are all on the cornerback, flexing their muscles and what they did, but it was the whole team sequence to make that happen, right?
That's why I don't like fantasy football or baseball. I really don't, because of that.
Yeah. And so I think it's so countercultural to live in that form of community, but I think it's I'm going to argue that it's important. So I would say, does an action ever involve only the person deciding to act? I gotta say no. I mean, I think maybe there are some things that in the moment only affect the person. But then again, if a choice, for instance, if I make a choice that only affects me, is still going to affect me to an extent that's going to then affect a choice I make that will affect somebody. So that choice at the end of the day still affected somebody, would be my argument.
That's what I believe.
Yeah, I think, answer to the second question, no, nothing ever involves only one thing or one person or one entity. We know, right? physics proves to us that we are all way more connected than we ever are separate.
Yes.
No matter, even if we're physically separate, we're never actually separate. Even physically, we are interconnected. And so, no, I think everything has ripple effects throughout creation, not even just on this planet. And then the first one, I would change, to what degree are we responsible for anyone? I would change that to what degree are we responsible to anyone?
I agree.
And I would
Ooh.
say, we're responsible to. You can get into a lot of trouble with responsible for, right?
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Trying to control people,
I was
trying
gonna say
to
control and power, right?
Exactly right. But as far as responsible to, yes, responsible to, everyone. I mean, I think what, and Jay, when you were saying, it's exactly right that it's the community. We are so hyper vigilant on individual responsibility that we have come to a point where we're just a whole bunch of individual people fighting each other because there's not that idea of any kind of we need each other.
Right.
And we really truly do need each other.
Right.
We were created that way. It reminds me, or what it makes me think of is when I think of abortion rights, I think of that I would never want anyone to have to make a choice in a situation with an unwanted pregnancy. And it is just as much my responsibility that person or people are having to make that decision as it is their responsibility, as it is their community's responsibility, as it is all of humanity's responsibility. Mm-hmm. That's something that we all share responsibility in, and instead of just a whole bunch of blame,
Right.
Who is to blame? We're all responsible.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes for people, with food insecurity. That goes with people experiencing homelessness. We all share in that responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for saying that.
This is kind of a little sidebar to that. The Tom Hanks movie where he's on an island.
Yeah.
Where
I
he's
can just
stranded.
think of Wilson.
I know.
Yeah, okay, well, the
Why
reason
can
I
we-
really like that movie...
What's that?
Castaway.
Castaway.
Yeah,
Thank you,
The
Doug.
reason I really like that movie is most movies would end with him being saved.
Oh, that's right.
But it goes
That's
the
right.
next step, his encounter of how his wife's, or his girlfriend, I guess, life changed
Yeah.
because he was gone. So the lack of him even not being there affected who she was. And that's,
Right.
kind of like the butterfly effect. We don't know how much we affect one another.
That's right.
I
But it's profound, right? We can
Yeah.
only assume that it's profound.
Yes.
Even though we won't ever know the extent of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just watched something the other day that this guy was saying that him and his wife they got divorced, and through counseling and other things, even after the divorce, they cultivated a really good friendship. And he was sharing with her of I'm not happy the situation happened, but I learned so much, and it made me who I am today.
Sure.
And she said, and I'm thankful for that, but she said, your learning moment was my trauma. And he said, and he goes, that broke me, and also made me realize that, even though that was a learning moment for me, it was still all connected to her, and it was her trauma.
Yeah.
Right.
And they've been able to, as like best friends and supports for each other, be able to acknowledge that and talk about it. But just that interconnectedness, right?
Absolutely.
He learned from it. She had to heal from it,
Yeah.
right? And so, yeah, just another example of no to the second question.
Yeah, and,
Boy,
and a
those-
reminder to
those-
be humble with your
those-
perceptions.
Yeah.
Those are two pretty deep questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think? You're making us work for it today, Mel.
They're a
All
little
right.
more shallow.
Let's
Okay,
go a little
let's-
light on this one, Mel.
Let's not dive quite as deeply into the well. Okay, all right. He promises this one's going to be a better one. All right, there we go. Oh, it's stuck. Okay. There
He
we
likes it so much he won't even let go of it.
The papers that look small always scare me.
go. I know.
Oh.
No.
Oh, well,
what assumptions do people make about you based on your religious identity or lack thereof that are frustrating?
I think that's a funny question for us to answer.
It really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you mind if I start?
Yeah.
Yeah,
me.
I'm ready for an answer too, but go for it.
One story that goes along at the beginning was when I was in seminary. We were our senior year. Me and Eric Elkin went golfing, and 2 other guys in their 20s joined us. We were in our late 20s, early 30s. And we get through like 5 holes before they ask us what we do. And, well, we're studying to be pastors. They take off. They're like, they finish that hole and say, well, we got to go.
Wow.
And that's really kind of it. I always feel uncomfortable telling people who I am or what I do before they get to know me, because they get this idea that I'm going to be like televangelist blank, or I'm going to have these viewpoints that Christians have. And for those who don't know, I'm not part of the Christian right. We'll just leave it at that. So, yeah, it's frustrating at times because people automatically, when you're a pastor, make assumptions of who you are, or they really watch their behavior. Mm-hmm. And if anybody heard me making my deck, repairing my deck, they would not watch their behavior in front of me. I'll just leave it at that. But no, it really is difficult. Now, you're new to the position, really. How do you feel?
Well, Jay, why don't you want to go next? And
Yeah, I think for me, it really depends where I am. If I am back at this, I was gonna say, like, I'm gonna probably offend some people, but my assumptions are, which we shouldn't assume, the community I might offend probably isn't listening to While at St. Luke's, but when back hometown, there would be a lot of assumptions made about maybe not necessarily who I am, but who I should be. And I'm just gonna name it. I am not that person. And so I think for me, there's that fine line that I walk of like what battles do I fight, so to speak, in the sense of like part of me does have that like more like sassy side of like I'm gonna really show them who I am now, and then the other side is like, all right, I'm here for 3 days, I'm gonna play in the sandbox, but like
I am a witness.
But I think the other side is I would agree with Pastor Tim that there is kind of that fine line. If you're I don't know, if you're out for dinner and in a place where you like spark up a random conversation with somebody, and then there's always that moment like if you start doing the like, well, what do you do? And I'm always, I don't know if I should be. I want to be clear. I'm proud of what I do, and I'm proud of representing the ELCA and being a Christian, and representing Christ in that way, and representing St. Luke's.
Yes.
I'm very proud of that. But also, like, conversations have literally shut down after sharing that,
It can
and
be
so
very-
it could go either way. And some conversations have gone the other way of like, oh, last week my aunt just died of cancer, and they just like all of a sudden assumed that I was somebody they could talk to, and like I was thankful for that moment too. So I don't want to say it always goes that way, but yeah. So
You're right.
Kind of complicated, I guess, for me. I think I make in a vulnerable moment, I'll say this, I think I make the mistake of assuming what people assume a little too much. But
yeah, I think that's
And Jay just hit me right in the heart.
very apt point.
Very, very much so.
Yeah, so I am new to this. So I would say probably the most frustrating assumption is that all Christians believe all the same things. I guess.
That's
And that the representation of Christianity in the public sector, especially the American media sector, is what Christianity is. I take responsibility for that. I'm not blaming anybody else for that. I think that it is our responsibility to try, I think, our best to represent what we think Jesus is all about, and preaching love and preaching acceptance. So I think that it's frustrating when I feel oftentimes presented. Just today, I got an email presented with, look at this pastor who just resigned from a church in Dallas because he had an inappropriate social media relationship with a parishioner.
Mm-hmm.
And like, what do you think about that?
Right.
Where's your Christianity now? Yeah. And I mean, sometimes it just feels like we just get really beat up on that stuff. Anybody whose identity involves being a Christian, just because there is so much hypocrisy in Christianity, that it's hard for people to disassociate us from that. I mean, even if it's like they're not saying it to me personally, right? But I do get a little bit frustrated. I don't have an explanation for this stuff, right? I can't defend this stuff, and you just have to say, yeah. You know what? Human beings are pretty broken, and Christians are no exception. And sometimes maybe they're right in that rule, right? Like, expertly.
Well, one thing that came to mind. May I share a lament that something that's happened to you and I? So one of the assumptions is that someone would walk into the church and. If you're watching the video, you'll notice that Pastor Carey is almost always wearing the clerics, and I obviously do not wear them. And someone will walk into oh boy,
you're like right on the edge, buddy. Like within days, I feel like we're days away from that.
Yeah, do I have a new limit? No, I'm just kidding. But like, someone will walk into the church. And we'll be standing. It's happened before, where we're standing together, and they immediately looked at me and asked for a pastor. And I think, for me, I lament that those assumptions are made. Still, that you wouldn't be assumed to be a pastor, but then also lamenting that, like the I don't know how to say it, if it's lament but the privileges that I live in that is assumed of me quicker. Just that the brokenness in all of that as well, that we bear, per our question earlier, like I think we do bear that as community, right? Like I'm responsible for that too, right? Like I am, like I know I can walk into a room and use my voice in most Christian scenarios much quicker than you could. And like, that's not right. It's not fair. We need to fight against that, but that is something we bear together. It's not your fight alone, right? So,
I do some behavior because of that. I mean, I will, because of the way we're viewed. I will go into my local Quick Trip quite a number of times as a normal.
Yeah,
and then I'll start wearing my cleric when I go in there. So then they say, because that helps remove some of the assumptions. Yeah, and we all carry those assumptions too. The experience that you're running into between Pastor Carey and you, the encounter is there's an assumption made that the leader needs to be a man. Right. No,
that's just not true, right?
Right.
Yeah. Hope that was
fantastic. Yeah, great. That was not that undeep though.
Yeah, right. Mel is hitting us with them today.
Definitely, which makes me think of cookies.
I think you all learned a cookie.
Yeah, right? Tell us about these, Doug.
Yeah, so this is out of a 1950s Methodist cookbook. They are called $50 cookies. I did not spend that much on ingredients. And in fact, I was a little bit concerned because there is quite a bit of flour in this, and the regular cookie ratio, like the ingredient ratio, seemed off to me, so I wasn't quite sure how they turned out.
I think $50 cookie could be Doug's new drumming name.
$50. We're workshopping.
Wow.
There's multiple names on that list. I will say that I do personally see that taste that there's a lot of flour.
Yeah.
I don't dislike this cookie though.
Yeah, me too. I almost want to say it tastes like maybe a shortbread, maybe shortbread a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah, which I love that flavor.
Yeah, because it's heavy on the flour, but it's
Very
not
good.
dry.
Yeah,
No,
yeah. I was
right?
gonna say it's really nice and moist. Like the frost or the cream filling is delicious. I feel like I would love a nice. Sorry, Pastor Tim, coffee, maybe a cocoa or a tea for you, but some nice hot beverage, delicious with this cookie. I give it. I don't know. I give it a 5. I don't know what else I would want with this cookie. It's delicious.
Jake, can you get the tray up on the?
This is actually a cookie of my childhood. Like
Oh.
if I went to like one of the neighbors,
Really?
the Vickers or whatever, this would be what might be out for us kids.
I've
to
never
have.
had this cookie before.
Yeah.
No,
I mean,
me
just
either.
Yeah.
cream filled, kind of a shortbread.
It was a little.
And this was before we discovered things like health and you know where lard was a major food group. But no, I really like this a lot. This actually is almost reminiscent for me. So I give it a 5.
Nice.
I'm gonna go 4, but I'm not even like happy with myself for going at 4. I feel like I should go higher. I think the problem like Pastor Tim's going in a second, like I'm definitely gonna like eat enough of these, but I think it was the fact that I got the idea that there was a lot of flour in my head, and so I keep tasting it.
Oh, sure.
But it's
yeah.
no, it's really good. Actually, a previous podcast did the like graham cracker and frosting.
It's kind of
thing,
reminiscent of
and
it, right?
It's a little bit like that, except like better because it's like this soft, delicious cookie. So
See, I think-
I really like it. I'm gonna go 4.5.
I think this cookie
yeah.
could go without the frosting myself.
Yeah,
Okay.
even just one of the halves, I would definitely
Yeah.
like to eat.
But if
yeah.
you dunked it in coffee,
There's
it
some
became
extras.
over.
There's some extras
Delicious.
in the kitchen.
Oh, no.
Unfrosted.
Oh, unfrosted.
Yep.
Oh, a little cut. Okay, so
Uh-huh.
I have a
Yep.
date with one of those later.
Afternoon espresso. And,
Oh yeah. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of why I also like circus peanuts too. I love this I love texture. Texture to me and flavor are like so like closely related,
Interconnected.
which makes me think of my God moment for this week. Matt, my husband, and I had a day, and we went to have a tour of the 10 Chimneys historical site. If anyone is familiar with that, it's in Delafield, Wisconsin. And it was the summer home of the Luntz, the very most famous Broadway stars of New York in the early 1900s.
Really?
And yeah, Alfred Lunt was from Milwaukee, and Lynn Fontanne is British. But they built this summer home and came and lived there every summer. They would tour all of their shows in the winter and fall and spring, and then live at this home in the summertime. And it's exactly the same as it was when they were there. And there's a lot of outbuildings. It's in Genesee Depot, which is in the Kettle Moraine. So it's also just a very beautiful piece of land that they have. And so as I sort of went through each place and room and building, I am sometimes blessed, but also sometimes cursed with sort of a very acute sense of smell. And I have come to believe that actually God encounters me with smell oftentimes. And we all know that smell is very closely related to memory. It's a very visceral memory thing for me, and it is for me too. And it as I sort of experienced like each different place has, historical places too have their own smells, and it's always can be so interesting, and one room smells this way and another room smells that way. And it was an absolute celebration of, I think, the senses that that we were created with, and I'm just so grateful for all of the ways that we can perceive beauty in the world, and remembering to be grateful for that opportunity to experience all of the gifts that creation gives to our bodies that we receive through our senses. It isn't always about just sight and sound, or all those. It's sight, right? We rely so much on it, but to really ground ourselves in what it means to be created, what it means to be a human being, like alive in this moment. And I think that's what smell does for me too. Is that you can't really not be in the moment with smell. Like when you smell something, it brings you right down into that present moment, which I always feel is the most holy time, is the present. It's the thing where if we can dwell in it more often, it's just a lot easier for us to remember who we are when we do that. So my God moment. Thank you.
And thank you for journeying to the well with us. God's peace be with you.
The Well is a podcast of St. Luke's ELCA in Middleton, Wisconsin. You can follow for new episodes airing every other Thursday on St. Luke's website or wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to drop a question in The Well, you can dive over to stlukes-elca.org/thewell to submit your questions there. The Well is sponsored by St. Luke's Foundation. The foundation is dedicated to leaving a legacy for future generations. You can learn more at stlukes-elca.org/foundation. Thanks for listening, and we'll meet you next time here at The Well.
My favorite shelving unit is...
I'm sorry, I tried.
You can just end it there.
I'm sorry. I made eye contact. And,
I can't do that one.
Was it a corner unit?
No, it was an IKEA one.
you have to do it.
No, I can't remember the name now. What's the name of the main shelving unit there?
Yeah, what is that one?
I can't.
It's gone now.
Steph knows. She
I
could
know,
probably order it
I
for you by
know.
number.
I'm sorry.
Poor Doug. How do you deal with this?
I don't know. I thought we were still rolling.
So anyways, your name is Pastor Tim.
Okay.